We know that when stress, anxiety or distress is high, it impacts on our ability to focus our attention and our concentration. It therefore impacts on the ability to make effective decisions. We need to make effective decisions to perform well. I think the real flavour at the moment is burnout. Understanding that just the absolute grind is not healthy. I'm seeing a lot of people, probably between the ages of 35 to 55, who are stuck in this hamster wheel of burnout and don't know how to get off.
Liz Gould is a performance psychologist and high-performance coach who has worked with elite athletes, corporate leaders, and top professionals around the world. Her work bridges the best of sports and business, showing that real high performance isn't about intensity, it's about intentionality.
Liz Gould, welcome to The House Story.
Hello, thanks for having me.
I'm very excited to go through quite a lot today with you. You're an expert in mindset, and so I'm very keen to explore that. Before we do that, can we go back to you as a child, and maybe you can tell me a little bit about young Liz?
Well, it's interesting that you asked me that question as a psychologist, because it's often the question that I'm asking people who I'm working with, what's in their timeline. And, I think it's really important to acknowledge our past, because it really informs who we are now, and it informs our mindset and the approach that we take in what we want to do in the future. And when I reflect on myself as a kid, I think, I was probably pretty driven. It was achievement was something that I was always interested in. I was never the smartest kid, but I was smart. And I think growing up, I really learnt the value of grit and working hard. My mum's pretty resilient. She's had a lot of setbacks in her life. And she taught me the value of, if it's difficult, it doesn't mean it's impossible. And keep trying, because at some point that difficult will become easy. And so growing up, recognising that I have to work for it. It doesn't just always come easy. And I think what I've learnt now as a high performance coach, as a psychologist, as a performance psychologist, that's true. It doesn't just naturally come easy to everyone. You've got to work hard.
And did you finish year 12, go straight into uni, or did you take a big break?
Absolutely went straight into uni.
Okay.
I knew I worked really hard in my HSC and wanted to get a certain mark, because at that time I was thinking, I love sport, right? I absolutely want to go and become a sports physiotherapist. Didn't quite get the mark, just missed out. And so thought, okay, well, what I'll do is I'll just go to university, I'll study science and I'll switch over and, from science into physiotherapy. And discovered this thing called psychology, and didn't necessarily love anatomy and physiology, but in my first semester really loved psychology and learned that, wow, there's this thing called sports psychology where actually you get to still work with elite athletes and still work in high performance sport. But I'm not doing all the manipulation and all the massaging and all of the physical muscular diagnosis. I'm actually doing a lot of support around mindset, confidence, motivation, behaviour. And I fell in love with it then and there, and off I went.
That's amazing. And after uni?
So after university, sports psychology as an industry is actually very small, and there are very few full-time roles around Australia, and most of those come from within the state institute and academy systems. And obviously, the big kahuna is the Australian Institute of Sport. And so doing my master's in sports psychology, the goal was very clear to me that I wanted to work within one of the institutes. And I was very fortunate throughout my master's program to intern at the New South Wales Institute of Sport. And what was happening at that time is they were prepping all the athletes for the Athens Olympics in 2004. Yep. And so I got a really privileged view into what that preparation was all about. Which for me was absolutely consolidating that, yes, you've chosen the right career. This is absolutely what you want to do. But it's very rare that you go straight from being an intern straight into a full-time sports psychology position. And I was very lucky. But it didn't take me to New South Wales. It actually took me up to Darwin.
To Darwin?
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, there's the Northern Territory Institute of Sport up there. Darwin is one of the most amazing cities in Australia. If you haven't been there, I suggest you get there on a flight immediately. It's beautiful. The people are amazing. The lifestyle is amazing. And, you know, a Sydney girl who grew up in the Shire packed her bags and got on a flight, knowing not a single person, and took a job as a sports psychologist up at the New South Wales Institute of Sport. And primarily their focus is working on developmental athletes between the ages of, say, 15 to 21. And it's a real key time for athletes. They get to a stage where they think, I'm either going to really fully commit to becoming an elite athlete, or actually my friends are really cool and I want to spend more time with them. And so you play a really pivotal role in not only their personal development, their education and some of the choices they need to make in their teenage years, but also too, you know, you're really fostering some of those key capabilities that are required to move them to the next level. And the whole purpose of the Northern Territory Institute of Sport was to get those athletes into some of the bigger institutes like New South Wales or Victoria or Western Australia, or even into the Australian Institute of Sport. So I felt really privileged because I thought, great, this is my dream. You know, I get to go and work as a sports psychologist and an athlete career and education advisor in Darwin. Worked with the most beautiful Indigenous athletes who were super talented and impressive, and learnt so much about a culture that I wasn't brought up in, and still learning every day about what that is and what that means. Such appreciation for it. And then had the most amazing 3 years living and working in Darwin and supporting junior developmental athletes in Australia. Very privileged to see them go on and do some great things.
I grew up in Darwin. I don't know if you know that. Yeah, I actually grew up in Alice and Darwin.
Beautiful.
So I did the whole thing. That's quite interesting. How do you help a young individual decide whether they're going to hang out with their friends or become a professional athlete?
I'm not sure whether, I think there's a number of nudges that happen along the way. And I think socially, you know, it's a real pivotal time where the opinions of your parents become less relevant, and it's all about that social connection. And what are my friends up to and what are they doing? And what I found is with athletes at that age, they tend to gravitate towards the social network within their sport. And if they've got a really strong coach and supporting team around them who are their guides and their mentors around not just sport but more broadly in life, and if they feel safe in that environment, they tend to follow that through. If there isn't as much safety or mentorship or, you know, just a bit of disengagement that's starting to happen about that age within their sport, the pull factor around spending time with their mates on a Friday night, going to parties, you know, on a Saturday where they would normally have training or a competition, the pull factor in that is pretty strong. So they naturally decide themselves, but it's one or the other. You know, it's never an in-between. But there are a couple of nudges along the way from friends, family, mentors, coaches, strength and conditioning coaches, psychologists.
Yeah. Is there like a framework or an approach that you use to help them decide, or to help themselves decide?
It's a really pivotal time as an adolescent. You're learning, you're growing, you're experiencing, you're taking risks, calculated ones, sometimes some silly ones as well, but you're really discovering who you are. And so because of how you've been brought up, a culture that you may have been brought up in, it really is about exploring some of those values and what is important to you now as a person. What do you think may be important to you consistently in the future? And does this now, this sporting experience, or does this social experience, or even education experience, does this align with who I am now and who I want to become? So it's exploring values.
Yeah, I wish that that was something that was explored more in school when I was in school, but it wasn't. Do you think that that's something that plays out as someone ages, or do you think that that's something that is really just prevalent in young individuals, like that, looking at and deciding, are my values aligned with what I want to do for work?
I think they grow. They continue to grow. I think they're informed a lot by how we've been brought up. We have a bit of a blueprint, thanks to our family system and our parents and some of our early experiences. But with our personality traits, 85% of them are relatively stable throughout our life. And sometimes they get shaped by experiences, and sometimes our values shift and change based on those experiences as well. So it's a really important time during adolescence to explore what they are and what that means. And most of the time, they can be carried through adulthood.
That's interesting. Looking forward, after your role in the Northern Territory, you worked with a lot of sporting organisations and are you able to touch on any organisations you've worked with or any big teams or anything like that?
Yeah, I've had a really privileged career, and I feel very lucky to have had the experiences that I've had. Certainly as a psychologist, people open up to psychologists in therapy and just general conversation. Sometimes it was, on the back of a bus or, on a plane, going from Heathrow to Mumbai. It's really interesting how that dynamic shifts and changes from, say, a therapeutic setting into an internal role. And I'm very fortunate that the first decade of my career was very focused around being an internal psychologist within an institute system or within a sporting team. So after the Northern Territory Institute of Sport, I went and worked for the England and Wales Cricket Board and had a real privilege of working with some of the Northern County professional cricketers and the English cricketers, men and women, over in the UK. So working there as their personal development and welfare coach, really looking after their dual aspirations and preparing them for not only the pressures that they are exposed to within sport, but also to what does life after sport look like? It's a very short career in the context of a broader lifespan or in the context of a broader working age profile. So how can you maximise what you've got now? How do you take those opportunities? But also to how do you prepare yourself for life after? Now, that's a really difficult conversation to have with someone who's like, no, I just want to be a professional athlete and that's all I want to be thinking about now. There's some real merit in that because they require focus and they require that clarity and real understanding of what they need to do right now. But also they can't leave things too late. So it's really important to start having those conversations early around what's that going to look like for you afterwards. So I was very privileged to be able to travel all over the UK into these little county cricket grounds and these second team cricket grounds, village cricket greens, which were just immaculate and pristine, and the groundsmen were just so proud of their work, and little cucumber sandwiches for morning tea, and it was very traditional and it was a lot of fun. And I think I did a lot of impactful work with people who went on to play for England.
That's awesome. And when you reflect on that period, what do you think sets great athletes apart from good athletes?
I think an understanding that it's a long game. No pun intended there. But when we talk about the difference between a good and a great performer really understands the concept of sustainable performance, and that it's not just mastery and excellence right now. You need to actually be able to sustain that over a period of time. You can't just do it once and then you're an expert at it or you're masterful at it. You need to be able to cultivate a rhythm and a routine around your practice, around your approach, around your mindset, to ensure that, you've got sustainability beyond just that sort of immediate performance. And I think that's the difference. I think that good performers actually think, okay, well, I've done really well. I've met the goal. I've achieved the target. I delivered the project. Therefore, I'm good. Great performers go, okay, well, I've done all of that, but what do I learn from this? And if I get the opportunity again, how can I refine things, be a bit more adaptable and agile to make sure that I'm doing it either more efficiently or delivering a higher quality or a better outcome and a result for next time? And so there's that constant approach around reflection, feedback, but also to understanding their own rhythms, their own energy systems. One of the things that I think is really interesting when I work with both sporting organisations and more corporate organisations is a significant difference between understanding those rhythms and those cycles. High-performing teams are actually really good at putting in rest and recovery and using that to really reset and recalibrate to then get back up and perform again.
Yes.
That's a key part of sustainable performance, really understanding what the energy cycle is. Most corporate organisations look at that and go, push, push, go harder, go even harder than that. And actually, your annual leave, we want you to take a break. It's really important, but I'm the one who signs off on that annual leave, so I get to tell you when you have a break. And high-performance sport environments, those breaks are built in. They're strategic, they're intentional. There's a purpose to that. They recognise that if we push through and we absolutely smash our athletes early doors, we're not going to get to the grand final. We're not going to make a whole season. So they build in rest and recovery. And it's not just about physical recovery, which I think a lot of people think it is. It's also too about the psychological recovery. And I think there's a lot that corporate organisations can learn from high-performance sporting teams and the framework that they have around energy cycles, rest, recovery, reset, recalibration to manage sustainable performance, not just high output, high intensity, which often leads to burnout and failure.
That's a piece of gold. Yeah, I think that's really valuable. It's been very interesting and reflective for me as well doing these podcasts, because I've heard from very high-level sports players things like we get very constant and regular fast feedback, whereas in business you don't necessarily always get it like that. Sometimes it can be really delayed and sometimes it can be fast. And now hearing you say that also about managing energy is so interesting, because I feel like in business it is always just go, 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 go. And forgetting to stop feels like then you just hit a wall and all of a sudden you have to stop. You don't choose to stop and then you get to try again.
I think a big myth for people is that they think high performance is about intensity. It's actually about intentionality. And everything that you do can be really cultivated towards the goal that you want to achieve. And within organisations, that hustle culture, the culture of burnout, is absolutely not the right approach to performance, and certainly not to sustainable performance. And because it does lead to burnout, it does lead to failure, it does lead to people falling off the cliff in terms of their energy, but also to feeling the pressure to be sending off emails and working at 10, 11 p.m. at night, or getting up early and sending a 3 a.m. email because they forgot to do, there's all of those, that hustle culture that doesn't lead into high performance, although I think a lot of people think that it is. A huge limiting belief for people who are caught in that cycle is that if I'm not struggling, then I'm not putting in enough effort. Therefore, I'm failing. What high performers tend to do, both in a corporate setting and in a high performance sport setting, is that they understand the value of quiet and calm. And that's really recognising their own energy rhythms and cycles. When they've got that time to stop and to reset, we know that when stress, anxiety or distress is high, right, it impacts on our ability to focus our attention and our concentration. It therefore impacts on the ability to make effective decisions. We need to make effective decisions to perform well.
Yeah.
We're constantly making decisions all the time. So really important for high performers to recognise the importance of quiet and calm, and that sometimes focusing on less, but focusing on the quality can deliver a better outcome than just the intensity and go output and struggle and burnout.
That's a really good point. It's always really insightful chatting to psychologists, because sometimes I find that psychologists put into words what maybe I can't as in a far better way than I can. And so it's not necessarily that I don't experience the emotion or that people don't experience the emotion. It's just that I think psychologists sometimes put it into a way that makes more sense.
I hope so.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I think one of the things, and again, I think it's a myth, like people think that pressure is bad. And when I'm under pressure, this is a really bad thing. Pressure is actually good when it's calibrated. So if you don't have monitoring around that level of pressure, that's when it inhibits growth, but it also promotes burnout. So, when we're talking about, you mentioned feedback before, athletes are really good at getting feedback because they get it all the time, multiple times throughout their training session, throughout their day, and they're constantly having to make those adjustments to that feedback. Now, in a workplace environment, we're lucky if we get maybe like a one-on-one, maybe 30 minutes with our boss this week, if we're lucky, because everyone's triple busy, right? Yeah. Or maybe that feedback only comes within a performance cycle every 3 months or every 6 months or an annual performance cycle. It's actually not enough. And so what's really important is when you're having those regular ongoing feedback conversations, and it doesn't always have to be more formalised, what we're actually getting is clarity, and we're getting priority and focus. And athletes always have that. It's very clear to them. Every single training session has intention, has a goal, has purpose. And there's clarity within that, so they can focus on what they need to do to get better each time, which leads to sustainable performance.
Yeah.
When we're looking at workplace environments, often it's just, can you do this, can you do that, this is the directive, get this done now. Often the feedback on the how or the why is missing. And so what workers have to then do is they have to try and fill in the blanks themselves. And often that can cause confusion. They have to make assumptions. Sometimes those assumptions are wrong because they don't have the context or the information that maybe their director does. And so when you're missing those pieces, that's when performance can decline. And it's not necessarily a capability issue, it's a communication issue. And one where clarity, focus and priorities haven't been communicated. But high performance sport does that exceptionally well.
Yeah, it does. How do you approach typically starting with a client?
Often it's asking them, what are you here for? How can I help you? What do you feel you need? What's front of mind for you right now? And that's really important. I feel, I work from a very person-centered approach, and I feel that everybody knows what might be going on for them. They may not always understand some of the frameworks or have the tips, tools or the strategies to help them cope with what's going on, to help them manage what's going on, or to help them move through that process in a way that is safe and supported. And often my responsibility is about teaching them those skills and those strategies. And once people have them in their back pocket, you can't take that away. They've got them for life. And so it's then their responsibility to action those when they need to. Clients that I work with, they're in their life 24/7. I might get 50 minutes a week with them, maybe 30 minutes a week with them in more coaching settings. So, it's really important that that it's quite targeted and that it's quite action-based as well. So very rarely will I do so much talk therapy. My sessions, individual sessions, are very much what's going on for you right now, what are you challenged by, What are the things that you found have worked this week? What have you tried? Any barriers that you foresee might come up next week, until we see each other next session. And then it'll be, okay, let's get to work. Let's look at some of the tools that we need to actually make sure that you're moving in the direction that you want to move into. And for something like anxiety, that might be some breath work, it might be some grounding techniques, it might be really understanding from a cognitive perspective what they're thinking and how they might be sabotaging themselves through that thinking, and then some strategies to really manage that thinking in a more productive way, not necessarily switching negative thoughts into positive thoughts, but let's look at why that might be going on and look at ways that you might be able to stop it before it hits catastrophe or stop it before it hits real negative thinking where it impacts your mood. When we're looking at mood, for example, if people are presenting with depression, we're looking at things like, okay, well, what are some of the things? I work from very much a positive psychology model, so a lot of Seligman's work and the PERMA model. What are some of the positive things? What are going on? What are your capabilities and where do you find that sense of achievement? How do you cultivate some of these positive emotions, even though they might be really difficult right now, but how do you want to feel? And again, really focusing on that intention. What's the clarity? Are you very clear on how you want to be? And if so, let's work towards going there. If not, let's explore what might be holding you back. I think one of the biggest challenges that people face is that they lack self-compassion. And when you don't have that, to me, that makes me think, where's your self-belief? And it's really difficult to have clarity and intention on where you want to go without that self-belief. So the core of what I am looking for and hoping to cultivate on the journey with somebody is how do we actually explore that, how you feel about yourself. And if you actually do feel that you can move your mood from okay to better or better to great, and how can we work to do that? But it's a real big barrier when people don't have the belief that they can actually do that themselves and they lack compassion towards their situation.
Are there common recurring themes that you see often as a psychologist?
I think at the moment, my niche market really is about working with high performers, and that's across a spectrum of industries, whether it be elite sport, lawyers, doctors, executives within corporate organisations. And I think the real flavour at the moment is burnout. And understanding that just the absolute grind is not healthy, and the conflict around how do I get off this wheel because it's going so fast and I've been on the hamster wheel for so long, I don't know how to get off it. And it goes back to the values that I was talking about. A lot of that just gets absolutely obliterated because somebody else has told them what the goal is. You need to meet this deadline. You need to deliver on this project. This brief needs to be done by this time. And other priorities, and that self-compassion goes, the self-sabotaging happens and the neglect starts. And all of a sudden, where they would go to the gym to really help monitor and manage some of their mental health and their physical well-being as well, all of a sudden they're staying back at work an extra hour, 2, 3, 4 hours. They're not getting what they need. They're going on that constant push. And so I'm seeing a lot of people probably between the ages of 35 to 55 who are stuck in this hamster wheel of burnout and don't know how to get off. And so they come to me and they ask for help and we get to work.
Do you think it's a seasonality thing? Like, does it come, it's July now, we're recording this, almost August. Do you think it's a seasonality thing? Like, do you see patterns throughout the year where it's like, yes, once we start to hit mid-year, I see a lot of similar themes pop up, or is it just independent?
It's very seasonal, and it's almost predictable year on year, very much like athletes. We have issues that happen off season. We have issues that happen in season, and certainly at the back end of the season as well. If they don't get into finals or final series, it's a peak risk time in terms of behaviour, in terms of relationship dysfunction, in terms of their own mood, because a lot of their identity is wrapped up in their role as a professional athlete. So we do tend to see those kind of things. But for a general population, those things also happen as well. So we know that as we move into the middle of the year, that we get a lot of people who are experiencing high levels of work-related stress. Certainly as we approach end of financial year, the May, June, July period, is a lot of burnout. And then probably the next wave that happens is as we approach end of year. So from a general population perspective, all of the conversations start happening around, well, who's hosting Christmas this year? Or where's the Christmas party at work going to be? Or who's going to manage that? And I don't want our family Christmas party to be at this person's place because I've been arguing them since 1993. Like all of the skeletons come out of the closet at that period of time, and there's that level of dysfunction and distress that can often happen. So people tend to present, with more personal related stresses towards the end of the year as well. We find that at the top end of a calendar year is a bit quieter. But in the last couple of years for me, it absolutely hasn't been. It's been flat out. And I think a lot of that is about that recovery that we were talking about before, that people just push and grind all the way through the year, and they hit January and they're on their annual leave and they're going, why am I not feeling any better? So I need to come and see someone to make sure that when I go back to work in February, that I'm feeling refreshed and I'm feeling recharged and I'm ready to tackle the year ahead and get off that hamster wheel. And it's not always about the individual skills that we can teach them. Sometimes it's about challenging the system that they're in and how that's impacting or potentially harming their well-being, especially in the workplace.
I'm curious if you've got an opinion as to whether one should take lots of small breaks or whether one should take fewer large breaks. And by that I mean, is it better to take maybe 4 weeks over December or in January, or is it better to take lots of 1 week breaks throughout the year? Any opinion?
Know yourself first and know what your own energy rhythms and energy cycles are. And that starts with your sleep patterns. All right. So we get the opportunity to have rest every single day. So if you've got good sleep and you're feeling refreshed when you wake up, that's a good indication that you're ready to go for the next day. Your body and mind did what it needed to do overnight and you've recharged to get into your next day. I think the second point to that would be about listen to your body and your mind and know when you're starting to feel stress, and that might be cognitive stress. You might feel a bit anxious, a bit overloaded. You might be someone who is naturally okay, but all of a sudden you're feeling really anxious and you're getting the butterflies and some of the physiological symptoms as well of anxiety, heartbeat racing, butterflies in your stomach, sweaty palms, and just sometimes it's waking up with that general feeling of dread. Oh, I've got to go to the office today. Oh, I've got that report due, So be really aware and insightful into what is happening for you and also to your body. All right, so our body doesn't forget. It remembers periods of stress and it certainly remembers trauma. So getting to understand, okay, well, if I'm feeling really heavy physically, what's going on? Oh, maybe I haven't got to the gym a couple of times this week, and that really recharges and it revives and energizes me, and my body feels really good, therefore I feel really good. So to answer that question, is knowing yourself is the most important part. Rest is really important. So sometimes organisations or teams, they work in cycles, they work in sprints. All right. What I say to organisations is if we're working with a 100-metre sprinter, they don't do one sprint and then go back to the start and do another one and then do another one and then do another one and do another one. But we're expecting people in projects and workforce to do sprints back to back to back to back. That just doesn't work. They need some period of rest and recovery. So looking at, okay, how are the ways that we can actually do that? And for you, it might be, okay, well, I need to take a couple of weeks off every quarter or a week off every quarter, and that just recalibrates me and resets me, recharges my energy so I can get back into the next 3 months. For other people, it might be daily practice. For other people, it might be, no, I want to take a really big chunk of 6 weeks off, between, Christmas and New Year's and come back in January and just stop everything, rest, recharge, and get back to it in the new year. So you've really got to know yourself, and you've got to know your own energy rhythms and patterns and how that works within the system that you operate in. And the system, I mean your workforce, your workplace.
How do you know, Liz, when you've had a successful session or if you've been successful with a client?
It's a feeling. My high performance is every conversation that I have, every session that I have. And I need to ensure that I'm prepared before I have that conversation. So making sure that I'm clear on the notes, I'm clear on their goals and their intentions, I'm clear on what they might be struggling with at the moment, I'm clear on how they actually want to move forward and where their progress is and where they're progressing to. So doing the preparation beforehand and then having a conversation. And I think for me, the intention is always making sure that everyone walks out feeling better than how they walked in. And they may not always feel better, because sometimes in counselling sessions they can be quite deep, they can be quite heavy. There's lots of tears and fatigue can be the feeling that people walk out with. However, I feel it's really important that people have clarity in what they need to do and that they feel confident in their own skills and capabilities to be able to do it outside of the session. So for me, I may not immediately get that feeling in the session or immediately after the session about how it went, but quite often I'll get it when they come back and they say, oh, I tried that, Liz, and that worked. Thank you so much. Okay. And to me, that is, okay, well, that was my performance. That did really, really well. Let's reset, refocus around what do we need to focus on today so we can have that experience again between sessions. So important for me to make sure that everyone is continually moving forward in the direction that they want to go. Yeah. And sometimes moving forward is just acknowledging that we have to stand still for a bit. And that's okay because that's where we are right now. Let's not lose sight of the bigger picture. Yeah. If you still want to go there, let's still work for it.
Yeah. What's something you wish you could tell your clients that you don't get to?
I'm known as a bit of a straight talker. Okay. I think that's part of my suite, and I do it respectfully, and it never comes from a place of judgment. It's always from a place of informed experience, and there's always frameworks behind it. But I think a lot of people just, especially high performers, because they're really good at having feedback, they're like, just tell me what I need to do. In the sporting world, athletes would say to me, I'm feeling really anxious, Liz, what do I need to do before I get back on the starting line in 15 minutes? And it's like, okay, right, here's my toolkit, let's try this, And so very used to being very applied in my approach. As I said, tips, tools, strategies, skills to be able to help you cope with what's going on and be able to help you move forward in those moments. And so when I'm in session with someone, it can often be, well, actually, try this now. It's likely that it's going to work. And once they feel that they have that information, they feel a lot more in control of it. It's exciting to watch where they take it.
What's a trait or a belief that you think your clients overvalue?
Overvalue. That's an interesting one. Quite often they overvalue other people and they undervalue themselves. So the comparison to where other people might be in their life or in their career, comparison is the thief of joy, right? So, often people are coming in saying, well, John Smith is doing this and I'm the same age or I'm at the same amount of time in my career, but I'm not there. So that must mean that I am no good. And so by minimizing how they experience themselves in their world, I think is something that they could really struggle with. And that comparison to other people, everyone's on a different journey. You can't compare your chapter 10 to somebody else's chapter 30. So, I think overestimating where other people are is probably the biggest challenge that high performers face. And I think especially with social media now as well, because people, can be very filtered in terms of what they put up on social media. And I certainly see it, and I think, no, you look like you're really, really happy, but I know you're not. But you're not showing anyone that you're unhappy because of the mask that you wear and that you want people to see you in a certain way, the optics, the impression management. And so working with individuals when their anxiety is often around that comparison to other people, and why haven't I achieved that yet, and why aren't I in that space of my life yet either, really pulling it back and getting an understanding of where that's coming from, and coming back to their personal values. Because if they're aligned with their values and they've got some clarity on where they want to go, that's actually where the good stuff happens. So it can get them back on track pretty quickly, but we do need to sort of deconstruct a few things that might be going on for them in their psychology. Yeah.
How can I become a high performer?
I spoke right at the beginning about working hard, and I mentioned before, high performance is not about intensity. It's about intentionality and being very clear on what you want to do, where you want to go, how you're going to do it, but most importantly, why that's important to you. And when you've got all of that alignment, it's absolute gold. You can achieve what it is you want to achieve. Am I going to win an Academy Award? Am I going to win a gold medal for Australia? Absolutely not. I don't have the talent or capability. But that's not my purpose. And that's actually not what I want to do. What I want to do is work with individuals to help them achieve their greatness, whatever shape or form that might be. It might be working with a surgeon about managing their balance between work and life. It might be working with a lawyer who's just returned from maternity leave and trying to juggle being a police prosecutor and being, a brand new mum. And so the journey isn't always about winning gold medals for Australia. It's about what is important for you. And so sometimes you might not have that clarity, and my role is to help you with that.
I was just going to say, how can I find what is important to me?
So we go back to your values and we look at what's important to you. So what is important to you?
Oh, too many things.
Such as?
Well, I think for me it's really important. Loyalty is a huge one, and trust, and I think that just comes natively from my upbringing. Another one is perfection, which comes out in a lot of things. I really try to always push the boundaries of trying to ensure that I can deliver the best that I possibly can, and that naturally attracts a lot of stress. So
with perfection, how does that enhance what you do? A two-parter question. And how does that derail what you do?
Enhances, well, we've got a fantastic client base, and I think that the reason that they stick with us is because we do a very good job, and so I suppose that's how that manifests.
How does it derail from what you do?
In business, sometimes things need to not be perfect. They just need to get out.
And that's the key right there, right? It doesn't always need to be perfect. It just needs to get done.
Yeah.
And what is a huge barrier to high performers is that real focus on it has to be perfect. And it's not necessarily anxiety. It's perfection. The perfectionism is driven by procrastination. If I don't get this done perfectly, then I won't progress it forward. But actually, sometimes you just need to get it done to progress forward. And the outcome or the result is not going to be any different to whether it was perfect or not.
Yeah.
The outcome is based on whether it's done.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and that's something I've had to focus on is because, I've got an overwhelming sense of respect for a lot of the clients that we support because they've built, in some instances, very big businesses, and so I feel that we need to do our best by them, and so sometimes it's important to also recognise what is best for them is getting it done quickly, not necessarily having to do it perfectly, and trying to find the balance of what is best for them in this moment.
Yeah, and I think that's a really key differential between people who are actually able to move forward and progress and get things done. Doesn't have to be perfect all the time. I'm really curious though, you mentioned trust and loyalty. Trust is key to any relationship, personal relationship, workplace relationship, any kind of dynamic, because it's the fundamental to safety. So tell me a little bit about, for you, why trust is important.
Because I've built a very fast growing business, and on that journey I've needed to have individuals that I can, without any shadow of a doubt, be able to trust. And in some instances it's occurred, in some instances it hasn't, and it's made me very mature very quickly along that journey. But that's why it's now far more important to me than it was before I started my business journey.
And how do you know you can trust someone?
I don't think you ever know. But
Really?
yeah, I don't think you ever know. But I think I have a high degree of, I think it's like a probability. I feel, is this person either a 90% or a 95%, or are they closer to a 70 or a 60%? And what would I be willing to risk them knowing? And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just comes from a place of, I'm trying to assess what my risk would be if things didn't work out well, which in business, unfortunately, you always have to think of the worst case so that you can plan for the best case.
Do you? Do you always have to think that way?
I try to.
I
Yeah.
wonder what it would be like for you if instead of trusting people to 95%, you were able to trust them at 100%. I wonder what difference that would make in your leadership style and your approach.
I should try it.
How do you know when you trust yourself?
I definitely trust myself. Yeah.
How do you know when you're doing that?
I think I'm willing to take a big risk. And I know it's a big risk, and I'm willing to trust that, as I have several times, that I know I will always deliver. And if I don't necessarily get it right, I know I will have tried my very best to make that happen.
So the effort,
Yeah.
not the outcome.
I can count on my effort,
Yeah.
and that I will show up every day of the week.
So you're a high performer.
I hope so. I try to be.
Yeah. That's what it is. It's the emphasis on the effort,
Yeah.
and not always the output. And you know, the efficiency in the effort, the quality in the effort. You know, you ultimately, you know, it's very likely that you'll end up going where you need to go. But when you're focusing on the output before the effort, that can cause you a few problems.
Yeah. I think trying to be consistent with everything that I do is huge.
And that's the key to sustainable performance. It is the consistency. You know, it isn't the intensity. It isn't the push. It's about all of those cycles, those rhythms, those, you know, output or that energy, and then the recovery, and then more energy output, and then the recovery. And, you know, the clarity in all of that, aligned with your values, aligned with your capability. It's all there for you.
Yeah. My staff think I'm crazy. I go to the Blue Mountains almost every other weekend because it's just peaceful and it's quiet. And I obviously live here in Sydney, which is not. But yeah, it's really interesting.
And that's the quiet time. You know, quieting your mind, quieting your body to rest, recharge, recover. So when you return back to Sydney, you're ready to go.
Ready to go.
You know, you're not stepping in on a Monday morning going, geez, I haven't recovered enough. You know, I've got the energy. I'm ready to go. I'm here. I'm going to put the effort in. Let's do this.
Liz, if this was your last podcast, what would you want someone to take from it?
Believe in your own capabilities, and the possibilities are endless.
Liz, thank you so much for joining.
Loved it. Thank you.